28 years later. I don't know about y'all. I thought that this was supposed to be a sequel, and I left out there thinking, nah, this was definitely a prequel. But as a millennial, what stood out most wasn't the structure. It was about the way that the film tackled parenting in the apocalypse. From the first scene to the last, it left me reflecting, not just on the story, but on how you help a child in a world that's already broken. 28 years later jumps almost 3 decades into the future from the original series. Their society is cooked. Screens, non-existent. The government, long gone. This entry into the series is not about avoiding the infected anymore. It's about raising your children in a world where that's normal and preparing them for a world without guarantees. What's up, everyone? Welcome to A Millie Mindset. I am Keith, your host. Here at Millie Mindset, we're gonna focus on pop culture, media, music, news, and see what we can learn through the eyes of a millennial. Let's tune in. I want to talk about the expectations entering this film. While the first film was 28 days after the outbreak and the second one was 28 weeks after the outbreak, they skipped months and they jumped straight to years. So we're talking about 3 decades into the future. You have to think about the way that society completely resets in that kind of situation. That's where the confusion in the film rises. You're watching this originally thinking that you're about to watch a sequel and you're gonna see where the original cast was, and we did get a glimpse of them, but at the end of the day, this is starting from zero. This is a whole new world order, entering the wild again and understanding how the infected have evolved and adapted to the environment. As a millennial watching this film, I couldn't help but empathize with Jamie, who was the father of Spike, who becomes the protagonist of our film. Spike is a 12-year-old boy who has to take the rite of passage to become a hunter in his society. There is no sweet games. This thing is not cute. He needs to go out there and provide for his village. The reason I said that this film is a prequel is this has almost nothing to do with the original. This is a completely separate group of people who are in the middle of this infected area and are trying to survive. This film is about parenting in the apocalypse and how a young boy is coming of age and becoming a man. The biggest comp that I can give to this film is The Last of Us. It's the equivalent of Joel trying to teach Ellie how to survive in the apocalypse. It is the same exact situation here with Spike learning to navigate the world and also having to manage his curiosity of a young boy. This film was a good look into the human psyche and our desire to want more and to explore. This young kid grew up in this remote village that was safe from the infected, but he wanted to know what was out there. He had a sick mother who needed help, and when he heard of a potential solution, he jumped out there to go get it resolved. Spike ends up being the main character of the story, but where the film becomes confusing is he wasn't for the first 20 minutes of it. That transitions us to some of the questionable elements of the film that I felt really impacted its overall grade. The film has like 3 main characters, and I just don't understand what was the angle with that. I understand that they were seeding something for the future, but that's what led to the confusion of whether this was a prequel or a sequel. At the beginning of the story, you thought that it was gonna be tied to the original series, and then we end up halfway through getting Spike and his father. Then they take up the bulk of the film. Throughout the movie, it was hard to determine what was really happening. You didn't know who you was following. You didn't know what story was happening. You didn't know if anything from the beginning of the film was gonna come in at the middle. It was strange. The pros of 28 years later. The main story was neat and concise. The parts of the film that had Spike and Jamie were intense, they were emotional, and it was a true coming of age story for this young man, and you were rooting for him the whole time. I thought that he was a really good actor. Everything was solid for the most part. Pro number 2, the tone of the film was good, and it did align with the other 2 entries in the series, but this one, it felt like it was trying to break away, which I was cool with it, but you're not entering this film thinking that or expecting it. Point number 3 is kind of a toss-up because if you were a fan of the original 28 Days Later series, the shooting style is the same, the comedy is the same, everything is the same. They kept the same umbrella. That brings us into the cons of the film. Con number 1, you didn't know what this film was. You didn't know if anything that happened during the movie was gonna tie back into the original, or you didn't know if it was gonna take a completely different angle. It was so confusing. It was so messy in the way that they constructed the film, and you didn't know what was gonna happen next, but not in a good way. Point number 2, this is also tied with the prequel sequel mix. There were storylines that were just dropped. There were things that were part of Spike and Jamie's storyline that you're like, okay, they're gonna revisit this, and then they never do. So you're left wondering, are they gonna close this cycle at any point? Or is this just gonna be for the next installation of the movie? And lastly, point number 3, and what I believe was the most detrimental thing to this film, the plot armor was too strong. It was just too strong. Everything in this film was convenient. Everything. This one day was the day he went hunting, and it's also the same day that they discover that there's a huge alpha amongst everybody, amongst the infected. They're looking for a doctor, and the doctor just happens to save them right in time. They're finding the infected that have some human characteristics. There's a soldier that pops up out of nowhere. Everything is so convenient in this film. I was watching it with Shorty, and she's like, I felt like there was no danger at all. There was no danger in this film. You never felt like Spike was in trouble because he would always miraculously get saved. It was extremely hindering to the film, where I felt like the sense of danger was just gone halfway through. 28 years later tries to be emotionally deep and franchise forward, but it just didn't land well because it was a sequel. And when you're taking this and now trying to go in a different direction, it just completely threw me off. As a millennial, I thought that it was profound to see the kind of struggle that a father would be going through and trying to raise his son in the apocalypse, and trying to understand that parenting is not easy, especially when the elements of our society just kind of reset. This young kid is stepping into this world of the infected, and he understands the danger of it, but he also understands that his wanting to follow his dreams, his goals, to protect the people he cares about is more valuable than the danger that he's putting himself in. All of these elements created a film that was good in some ways and then really challenging in other ways. I think that I could have got past a lot of the elements had it not been for the super plot armor that was surrounding the main characters. But with that, I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna pop this film into the millimeter, and I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. I do think the film is worth watching. I don't know how the loyalists to the franchise are really gonna feel about it, but if there's anyone who's interested in watching a film about a young man coming of age, a father trying to protect his family, and a mother doing what she can in the midst of the apocalypse, I think it's a pretty good watch. I believe that the true test of this film is actually gonna be the sequels that spin off of this. In my personal opinion, I think that these film companies and everything are grasping at straws and using old IPs, so things like 28 Days Later, using that franchise to try to build into something different. I feel like they're gonna create an entire different saga that stems from this, and how this movie lines up is all gonna be tied to the future entries in the film. That's just my thoughts. If you watch this film, you let me know, were you pulled by the prequel story of this, or were you so thrown off by the structure that you couldn't enjoy the film on your own? If you like my review and are interested to see the millennial perspective into all of pop culture and media and how it affects us today, please feel free to keep following me. And again, I'm Keith with a Millie Mindset. Please like and subscribe, and let me hit y'all with the motto one time. I don't like to lie. I only know how to keep it 100, 1,000, but more importantly, a milli. And we're gonna do that till we get to a milli. Thank you everybody for stopping in. Like and subscribe. I'll holla at y'all. Peace.